185milessouth.com.
Smash that Patreon button.
185 Miles South, a hardcore punk rock podcast. What's up, everyone? This week on the pod, we are doing a full episode on one of my favorite hardcore records of all time, the Floorpunch Division I Champ 7-inch. It came out in the year 1996 on In My Blood Records. And I sit down with Porter and Zev. We dive into everything about the record. Also on the back end, we've got a bunch of testimonials from people that love this record as much as I do. So stay tuned all the way to the end and check that all out. I want to talk a little bit about this record and the era of hardcore first before we get into it. This era of hardcore was so important to me because it's basically my entry point, and not Floorpunch specifically. My entry point was the Ignite records, Call On My Brothers and Past Our Means. As a teenager in Southern California that was way into Fat Records and Epitaph record stuff, eventually like that stuff just kind of gets grating on you if you got half a brain, right? Like, how many Fat Mike lyrics can I fucking listen to? You know what I mean? Or how many songs, Lagwagon singing about they want to be their cat. Like, can you take? And I was like reaching out for something that was like super serious, and for me, like Ignite, Call My Brothers and Past Our Means, like were like the perfect like transitional record where like it had the speed, it had like a little bit of the melody, but like it had none of the bullshit, and it like was so serious, and I just fell in love with it. And like that roots hardcore like revival, like all the bands that like were popping on the East Coast, like they didn't make it out to the West Coast like until a couple years later. And when you're a teenager, like 2 years is a fucking lifetime. You know what I mean? So Ignite was like the band, and we'd travel around and see them everywhere. And like through them, I got into, more old school stuff. Like they were kind of like, at the time talked about as like the modern Uniform Choice. So got into Uniform Choice, fell in love with them, got into 7 Seconds, got into Chain of Strength and all like the Rev stuff. And the problem with that is like, having one band that you really love and then all your other favorite bands like being gone. So much of hardcore is that, or it's a participation sport, and like so much of what makes hardcore special is like being there and interacting with it, right? Like it's a living, breathing thing. And like, people got to breathe that life into it. It's not like this stagnant shit that lives like behind barriers and on the internet. Anyway, so much good stuff was popping on the East Coast, and we were discovering it by buying records and trading records and sharing records and dubbing tapes and all that. And I want to talk a little bit about how important the 7-inch is to hardcore and why it was so important to this era. Nowadays, like, you hear me on the pod talk about it being kind of a dead format, and that's because it's not affordable anymore. And that was like one of the big selling points on the 7-inch, right? Was it used to be like this cheap thing to produce and buy. And in a pre-internet world, that mattered, right? Like to manufacture a 7-inch in the 90s, to make it was like pretty cheap. I remember the first time that I did the legwork on putting out a 7-inch in 97, I think at Bill Smith Custom Records, like to do a black vinyl 7-inch was like 60 cents. Transparent color was like 70 cents, and do a opaque color was like 80 cents, something like that, right? Plus you got to buy labels and your plates and all that, but like it's a pretty cheap thing. And so you could sell 7-inches for $3. And when you went around to record stores, like, you could buy a handful of 7-inches, and if you bought 5 and loved 2 of them, like, God, that was everything, right? Because like this is an era where you have limited resources, and everyone got burned from buying a CD that sucked. You spend $15 on a CD and it fucking sucks. Like your week is ruined. You know what I mean? But you could afford to buy a handful of 7-inches, and if a couple of them are great, like that's it. You hung on to them like crazy. And even the ones you didn't like that much, you listened to a lot and found parts you liked. And this era, the 7-inch was so important. I want to shout out real quick before I get onto the Floorpunch 7-inch, some of my favorite 7-inches of this genre in this era. First off, you got to shout out to the 10-yard fight, Hardcore Pride 7-inch, and then a big one for us was the Rain on the Parade, the Body Bag 7-inch. Also, Europe brought it hard in this era. I think that Crucial Response stuff was some of the best stuff there was. That Eyeball talking straight 7-inch and both Sportswear 7-inches. The Keep It Together and the It Runs Deep 7-inches. So good. And whoever is handling like the digital stuff for Crucial Response, handle business, dude. Get that shit online, because your stuff is like straight up getting forgotten to history. And it's a shame because the recordings are so good, the songwriting is so good, and it really holds up. Like this stuff needs to be out there. Anyway, also shout out to the Rancor Flip the Switch 7-inch and the Atari will be fighting 7-inch. Shout out to our boy Octavio. And then also the comps, the Time Is Now comp and the Growing Stronger comp. Shout out to Dan's boy, Chris Kelly. These are all crucial records, and the people that got them and loved them, like, what's up. Like we sat and like listened to these play on a record player and read along the lyric sheets and wished that they came and played our town. You know what I mean? And 10-Yard Fight came out in 97 and it was so epic, right? And them and Battery. And then they came back in 98 again and they played Oxnard, which was even better. Floorpunch made it out in January of 99 and it was one of the greatest shows ever. I went to all 5 of them. Of course, Oxnard was the best. And then EMI's made it out a bunch of times too. But I want to zoom into the 7-inch Floorpunch Division 1 champs. It's the best 7-inch of the era, and it's the one that holds up the best. It's insane how short, fast, gnarly, mean it is, while still like being catchy. Every single song is catchy. And that's like the impossible formula. Not that many bands have been able to do it. But like this full 7-inch, 6 songs straight through, they did it. And that's important. It's important to like highlight like tentpole records of this music. It's important to like acknowledge the past and the building blocks that make hardcore what it is. In 2023, hardcore is probably bigger than it's ever been. And it's because it stands on the shoulders of giants, right? So many people contributed to this thing before I was around, and that's what's up. This is one of my favorite records ever. So let's get into it. Everyone, Floorpunch Division 1 champs. Let's do it.
My name's Mark Porter, the singer of Floorpunch. I'm from New Jersey and I'm 50 years old.
Can you state for everyone specifically where Floorpunch is from?
Floorpunch is a New Jersey hardcore band. I myself am from the Jersey Shore. I grew up in a town called Monmouth Beach, located right on the Central Jersey Shore. Chris was from Maplewood, New Jersey, a town about 40 miles north of here. Bill, the guitar player, grew up in Edison, New Jersey, which is very central New Jersey. And Mark and Mike grew up in Matawan, New Jersey, in the same county that I'm in. My father actually lived there for a bunch of years. That's how I, kind of came in contact with them, visiting him on the weekends. I met up with some of these guys at hardcore shows. And it turned out my dad lived next door to one of their good friends. So they grew up in Matawan. That's about, my son plays football for Matawan right now. So it's about 12 miles away.
What is the state of the union for hardcore in your area and also just in general in the year 1994 before Floorpunch starts?
1994, it's, I kind of have like a weird story. I got into hardcore like 1986. I became straight edge in 1987. Heavily involved from like 87 to 91 Went away to college in Pittsburgh in fall of 1991. Became friendly with the guys in the scene out there. Came back in like 92, 93. And, I hadn't really been to a show in like a year because I was going to shows in Pittsburgh. I hung out with these guys in this band called Time Bomb. So I was a little, detached from what was going on in New Jersey. There was a 108 show at a soup kitchen, like a mile or two from my house. And I actually went with my dog just to hang out and see if I knew anyone. This is probably 1993. It was a 108 show. And Brett Beach was there, and we reconnected. I had known him since I was 14. This is, prior to the advent of social media and cell phones, so unless you're running into someone at a show or on the street, you really didn't, or pen paling, you really didn't keep in touch, We were very good friends, but, I had gone to school. He was in college up in North Jersey, and we reconnected. We went to a couple shows. I think I went to an Ignite show in early 94, a Mouthpiece show, and some other stuff like that. And it was cool, but, you had, stuff. The thing that really blew my mind is I went to a show at Rutgers University. I think it was 94 or 93. It was Human Remains, Resurrection, and some really bad bands. I mean, I forget. Maybe like Hoover or like Lincoln or one of those bands. And people weren't moshing, and like I was like, what is going on? And like Human Remains is from the Shore. And, I had first seen them in 1989. I'm a big fan. I love death metal. And, they had mosh parts and they were friends. So we always supported them. And so I go to the show that's packed and Human Remains is playing and everyone is just standing there. And I'm like, what is going on? So this one part comes on that's so sick in one of their songs. I think it's called Rote, maybe. And I just lost it and just started. I opened one up, you know what I mean? And people were like patting me on the back, like, oh, we've been waiting so long for this to happen. No one moshes anymore. People get scolded. So the scene was a little weird. I don't want to use the term PC because I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, but people were just going out of their way, like to be different from what they had come up from. Because, 1993, 94 is not too far from like my golden era of hardcore, So even the guys who were involved and girls in that golden era scene, they were doing the best to kind of become like post-hardcore and get away from that as much as possible. And I'm not even talking about like the ABC No Rio scene, which I thought was cool, but just even more detached than that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to say having pride in, hardcore is something that's important, but, they wanted nothing to do from where they came from. So that's kind of where it was at. Like I said, kind of detached. I wasn't going to a lot of shows because I was in Pittsburgh for a couple of years. Like I was seeing shows out there, and then I came home and just reconnected with Brett.
My name is Mark Zevany. I played on the Floorpunch 7-inch bass guitar. So 94, basically, I'd say that like the majority of it were a lot of basement shows. And you get your occasional Middlesex County College show, and you get City Garden shows. And City Garden shows would pretty much comprise of bands like Shelter, Sick of It All, and Biohazard. It was kind of like it was like the tier of like the New York hardcore scene it was like the bands that were still going were pretty big. There were those like larger shows, and then you'd have like the smaller shows and basement shows that were like of bands like Ashes and Split Lip and whatever else that would come through on tour. And, there's a lot of emo and a lot of like metal kind of stuff and stuff that was, moving progressively, I'd say, but not in the genre of music that I grew up listening to and what I was really into, what I wanted to see and what I wanted to emulate musically.
What is the mission statement for Floorpunch starting?
That was a simple one. To play the kind of hardcore we liked and what we grew up listening to, mainly like Youth Today, Judge, Breakdown, New York City hardcore, and stay friends. If we ever broke up, if someone ever left the band, we were done. We were never going to change members. That was like the mission statement. We were all friends. We started as friends. We were going to finish as friends.
Pretty much just a band about friendship, straight edge, moshing, and just playing fast music and playing music that we grew up listening to and what we wanted hardcore to bring back. It just wasn't there anymore. Like there was too much seriousness going on in the scene at the time, and for me playing in Endeavor, we were a pretty serious band, and the lyrics were very politically motivated, and I needed like an outlet or something that would be a little more fun and something that was like when I would write music for Endeavor, it was like heavier and it wasn't really what I wanted to truly be writing. I wanted to write stuff like Youth of Today and like Breakdown, and it just, I think I was playing at the time. I was playing a Curbjaw, and which eventually became Spirit, and like that was in that genre, like kind of faster music with mosh parts, but lyrically it wasn't quite what I was looking for. So for Floorpunch, it was, when we all sat there at that, I guess it was a show in Chatham, when we all, all of us were there, and we were like, let's start a band. Let's get something going that's like kind of in your face, straight edge. Like just have fun with it and see what happens. And that was kind of our mission statement.
What was the first Floorpunch show?
I want to say it was in Bordentown or a Fieldsboro, Bordentown, but it was at a like a little VFW hall, and there's no stage. I think it was with Human Remains. I think Earth Crisis played too, and Ensign maybe, and I'm not sure the other bands. But it was like a small little show. A small venue show, and it was pretty packed. And there was a lot of hype behind like what we were going to sound like, and what because we were kind of hyping it up through friends and everything else. And yeah, that was the first show, and it was kind of overwhelming. I think it was the first time I was nervous again playing a show after, I was playing for years with Endeavor, but like I wasn't sure how it would go over, and it went over extremely well. It was a good first show.
I'm going to mess this up, but you can cross-reference this. It's either Fieldsboro or Bordentown. They're right next to each other. But a kid named Pat Tutek, who did a fanzine and had worked with Geoff TDT at a screen printing shop, he booked the show. And it was us, Earth Crisis, Bug Out Society, Ensign, maybe one or two other bands. And I had actually requested Human Remains to get on the bill with us so we could mosh to them. That we were into them, like me and all my friends. So we wanted them on the bill.
How quickly did you put together the demo, and what was the reaction upon its release?
It came together pretty quick. I remember the first practice. I think we had like changes and clear in the intro down, with vocals, the first practice. And the demo came together pretty quick, only like a few months into our existence. And I don't remember the first show the demo was released at, but it would have to maybe be our third show or fourth show in DC, or maybe our third show in Philly. But they flew out everywhere we sold. Everywhere we played, everything we brought sold, demo or t-shirt. I think what we put out, albeit, tongue in cheek and, youth crew revival, it was something people were really looking for at that time. So as far as shows and sales, we always did very well. The demo was very well received. We had Zusai, who was in release. Our intro is, kind of just the release intro mixed up a little. And, Mark and Mike, I had met them going to shows and seeing Killing Time and Breakdown and shows like that. So we were all on the same page musically. So the demo came together really quick, and as soon as it was released, it was very well received.
The demo went together pretty quickly. Like, I think we had the songs written before we even played it. Well, obviously we had, I think pretty much all the songs for the first show. And then, we recorded in that, I think in October for the demo of 95. And, yeah, it kind of all fell together pretty quickly. Like the first time we ever had a band practice, it just all, like I brought changes to the table. Chris brought clear and, a version of the intro. And, it just, I think the first thing we did was go through changes, and we all just looked at each other and we're like, holy shit, this is going to be awesome.
So the year's 1995 and the Floorpunch demo is out. How has the state of the union for hardcore changed in this year or so span?
Well, one thing I need to add is prior to Floorpunch, Cornerstone was around. They were a Connecticut band. And they were playing, I wouldn't call it like youth crew revival, but they were playing fast, late 80s style hardcore. And we were all into them. So that, they kind of pioneered that. And Mouthpiece had never really broken up. So Mouthpiece would, do shows with us and them and other bands of our like genre, and those kind of kids would come. But Mouthpiece would also play like the bigger shows, with like the Snapcase and the Donuts and that sort of thing. But with Floorpunch coming around, I'll never use the word copycats because a lot of these bands were our friends. But other youth crew revival bands started to show up, and we had our own little scene. Floorpunch, as we got bigger, we would play with bands, all hardcore bands, but and I hate to use the word like beat down or tough guy. I think that's silly, but bands that played a more aggressive kind of hardcore, we'd play with them. We would play with a band like Shelter. But the scene, it was like turning into like our own little youth crew revival scene with the bands from Pennsylvania. Some bands from Blade Crasher from Virginia Beach. In My Eyes came in a little later, but 1995, it was still pretty much just us, Mouthpiece, and Cornerstone. Those other bands started to come along a little later, but the scene was, I'm not going to say it was getting good, because what's good for me might not be good for someone else, and other people might have enjoyed it without us, but it was starting to change a little in our direction.
I guess it started moving in the direction of the style, like what we were playing. It was happening. It seems like it was happening in every city or small town in like that had like a decent hardcore scene. Like Boston, like obviously 10 Yard Fight they started at the same time or before us. And then you had In My Eyes shortly after. You had out in Pennsylvania, you had Ran the Parade, Rancor, like Tim from Mouthpiece. Like Mouthpiece was on the verge of breaking up at the time. And then he started Hands Tied. And, it really started to take off everywhere. Time Flies down to Virginia Beach. It was a great time for the scene.
Are there any notable shows of this era, like post-demo, pre-7-inch, that stand out to you?
Yes. Floorpunch was very fortunate in that we didn't have, early on, definitely did not have really any clunker shows. Maybe one or two that we had jumped on with bands not like us, where we, people kind of just watched us. I think there was two of those, but bands that were booked, shows that were booked properly. I think it was maybe our second show at Middlesex Community College with Mouthpiece. That show was bananas, and the videos on YouTube, you can see it. There's probably 600-700 people there, and we did amazing. And then we played a house show with Robbie Red Cheeks and those guys down there, and that even for a house show, that was sick. People were into it; it was packed. And then we played a show in DC. It was our first time on the road. That was definitely top 5 shows for sure. It might have been the 3rd or 4th show. And people showed out. Kids from Richmond, kids from DC, like all these are on the internet. And it was wild, that was a great show as well. Like I said, we were very fortunate. I think a lot of people at that time, the buzz started surrounding us with just the demo out and those first couple shows. And people were coming out of the woodworks just to check it out.
I say Hagerstown, Maryland was, I think that was with Ensign. I think 10 Yard Fight played, Rancor played, maybe Atari. But that was an incredible show, because that was like everybody was there. It's like everybody came out it was sort of in the middle of nowhere. I think we played Virginia Beach the night before, and we were on the road with Ensign for that. And Ensign, we're like, hey, if we're gonna, one of us, because they were asking one of us to headline like both days, so we made a switch with them. So we headlined the Virginia Beach show. And then we made them headline the Hagerstown show. I felt bad because we had such a great response, and they're the last band to go on for the Hagerstown show. So it's kind of memorable because we were kind of always at odds with Ensign with Tim, like in a ball busting fun kind of way, So which culminated in a football game that we crushed them in 7-0, going by ones.
How did he approach the writing for Division I champs compared to the demo?
Well, for the demo, like we all kind of contributed like equally, and for Division I champs, I guess. So Zusai was a pretty decent songwriter, but he was off at in South Bend, Indiana, like going to college at Notre Dame. So I can't remember if he came home at that point, but like we pretty much had the 7-inch all written, and so like I think Bill wrote one song, and the rest were written by me. He wrote a Stick Together, I believe. And then, the rest were all done by me. But as far as approaching, like I just kind of, I wanted to get things a little faster, a little heavier. So like I took influences from, like Youth Today, but like kind of tried to add like more of like the breakdown into that. And like a breakdown is one of my favorite bands, them and Killing Time. So I was trying to get that influence into some of our music, and it kind of shows on the album more than on anything else. But on the 7-inch, there's little things, little tidbits that were a little, influenced by those bands. But we're going for that sound for the most part. Something that like would sound like Youth Today, Judge, mixed with Killing Time and Breakdown, with a little straight ahead in there. Lyrically,
I'll speak lyrically, the same thing. I'm like a Neanderthal caveman when it comes to writing lyrics. I'm no genius. I just wanted to get it over with. So I would listen to Breakdown, Youth of Today, a little sprinkle of Judge in there, and just, one of my buddies from high school is Kid Steve McVeigh, who is still one of my best friends. I used him for inspiration in about 6 or 7 songs in that, era. He Broke Edge, the whole deal, tongue in cheek kind of stuff. But, that was pretty much it. Like I said, no miraculous brain power behind those lyrics. I wanted it to be caveman music. So, I think we achieved it.
So there's no credence to the rumor that you just listened to New York Crew over and over and wrote the lyrics in one night.
Oh no, that's totally true. I mean, it was the Breakdown demo and the Judge 7-inch, 100%. I forget if it was Division I champs or the demo, but for one of them, I wrote all the songs in like a day and a half, maybe even one night. That is true, but I don't want to mess it up and say which one. But it was definitely one of them, and I'm sure the one that I didn't do that, it was pretty similar. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The rumor was for the demo on that, but because you said that it was the same for both, I had to ask.
Yeah, I mean, I would, listen, there was no great thinking process, believe me. You know what I mean? If you listen to the lyrics, you can obviously tell, New York Crew is a huge inspiration, especially with songs like Clear and stuff like that.
How did the songwriting process for Floorpunch work?
Being involved in the process, so just as much as like being in the room, and I would help out in a sense, maybe say do this here, do that there, kind of thing. But they all pitched in. Mark, Mike, Bill, and Chris all were involved in the songwriting process. Zev's an incredible musician. Bill's a strong guitar player. Chris is a strong guitar player. Mike's a great drummer. Everyone was involved. I even think Kingshot, wrote some songs on guitar for the band. But when we would sit down in the room, they'd play the riff, they'd play the song, and, we'd all sit there together. Maybe we can do this, slow this down, speed this up. Mark can speak on that more. He'll know for sure who wrote what songs. But as far as the process goes, we would just spitball it in the room. Someone would play it on guitar, and then we would each one of us would give input what we should do where and put it all together.
Yeah. So like I lived fairly close to my Kingshot. He lived, we were less than a mile away. So anytime I came up with something, I'd hop in my car, drive over his house. That's most of our rehearsals at that time were happening at his house in his basement. So I'd leave my bass rig there, then I'd hop on, like, hey, I got this. Here's not this song. I guess it was not for me at the time. I was like, it's going to kind of sound like stabbed in the back, but with by Youth Today, and but my version of it, and I was like, I want a straight ahead quick power with like a nice little fast mosh part, and so I'd get ideas and just hop over, and be like, all right, this is cool. Let's work it out. We work out. So it was pretty much me and Kingshot for the most part. Like I'd come over with a riff, we'd work out some drums for it, and then show it to the guys for at practice.
So when you write that line, you losers better watch your back as we're taking out the drunks first. Like, do you write that by yourself and present it to the band? And what was the reaction like when you rolled that one out the first time?
I mean, that's totally like I've lost Judge 7-inch kind of stuff. That's where I drew that inspiration from. They loved it because that's what we were going for. Zusai was very adamant, especially about having an in-your-face straight edge band. You know what I mean? He was in Release, then he was in Resurrection. So he was, involved in like the very early goings of like, I'm not going to say the youth crew scene, but like the New Jersey straight edge scene, Release is, 87, 88. And then he was in Resurrection, which was a little more on like, not going to call it post-hardcore because there was a hardcore band, but, a little more modernized version of what was going on. So I think he wanted to get back to those roots of just like straightforward, in your face, straight edge. I think a lot of his buddies had Broken Edge at the time, and he was kind of like, I want to stick it to him a little. So that's what they requested, and that's what I delivered,
I thought it was incredible. It's such a in your face, like jock thing to say, but in a good way, I still think straight edge is like one of the most important things that happened in my life, even though I'm not edge anymore, but like that in that moment, in those times, like that was one of the most important things to me, so like just to hear something that was so in your face and like that's what we wanted to do with the band. And like, I thought the lyrics were just perfect, and Porter just did an excellent job of conveying that message.
What was the practice space like at this time? And what was a regular Floorpunch practice like?
So practices were mainly we would switch like studios. We would do I think most of the demo, a lot of the demo was done at our Red Bank rehearsal studios. I think our first couple of practices may have been in B sharp. That was somewhere in Metuchen or Edison. And then we moved to Red Bank rehearsal, and then we would do some practice at King Shot's basement. And then as we got closer to the 7-inch, it more became practicing in King Shot's basement. It was just cheaper, easier, a little more convenient. But at the time, I guess when we were doing the demo, Endeavor just came off a tour in 95, and I lost, we had a van fire, so I lost all my equipment. So I was in the process of, saving up and buying a new bass rig and buying a new bass and all that. So like mainly, like a lot of it I remember at King Shot's basement. And I remember his sister had like a little, her sister was still living home, his older sister, and they made a little room in the basement. So whenever she was home, like they had a framed out room in like the basement that the rest of it wasn't finished, and we would annoy her with our music and whatever else. So, but she was always supportive. She came out to all the shows and everything else. So,
yeah, we had a couple different rehearsal spaces. The main one, Zev will know this better. We practiced at a place in Red Bank, New Jersey, the Red Bank Rehearsal Studio, considerably, but this might have been after that. Early on, we were practicing Mike's basement. We wrote the demo in this place called like B Sharp Recording Studio I think it was in like Woodbridge, New Jersey. I want to say it was 2 hours once a week, which would, consist of spitballing some new songs, practicing the 8 or 9 songs we had in about 12 minutes, and then just talking shit the rest of the night. It was very casual,
But it was like an hour rental. You didn't have a lockout.
No. We rented space. I think it was like $15 an hour. We never, we had Mike's basement, but we didn't practice that much there. That was usually like if we had to get one in before like going on a weekend or something like that. We couldn't get in the studio. But most of the time, I believe it was Red Bank Rehearsal Studio.
Let's go through the songs. So I'll say the song title, and you give any of your thoughts about the writing, the recording, or your personal connection to it.
Sure.
Not for me.
Yeah, not for me. That to me was, it's probably my favorite song on the record. It's one of the ones that it was the first time we did a beat that was that fast, and it's so like fast mosh part, fast done. Like, and it's a quick song, over quickly. Like I love it. It's one of my favorite Floorpunch songs.
Typical straight edge song, first song on the record, short and sweet with a good dance part. I was a big fan of that song.
Changes.
This was kind of like other than Clear, like, the Floorpunch anthem, when temptation pressure come along, just remember we're 1,000 strong, some of my favorite lyrics in that song.
Changes is my favorite Floorpunch song, but that's mainly because I wrote that, before we were started the band. I had the mosh part and I had the fast part, but I didn't have like the middle part, like the, written out. Like I didn't really have a completed song. And I once we knew we were doing a band and like I had to have a song ready, I kind of worked it out and went over to King Shot's house, and we ran through it like right before the first practice. And I love it's my penultimate, like that's my mosh part. That's that bass riff. Like it's the best I've done, as far as I'm concerned with writing,
Stick together. This mosh part always reminded me of Up Front, which I was never really a big fan of. And lyrically, I thought it was okay, but I wasn't my favorite Floorpunch song. So we didn't play it out. I tried to put the kibosh on playing this song out as soon as possible.
Stick Together was that was written by Bill. So like I really like the fast part, but the end part, that mosh part is kind of like an Instead ripoff, like complete. I wasn't really familiar with Instead except for the We'll Make a Difference 7-inch, and so when I actually heard like their Bonds of Friendship album, and he's like, yeah, I kind of got it from this riff. I'm like, Bill, I don't know, like I was never like a giant fan of that mosh part. But.
No exceptions.
Seemed to be a crowd favorite, like I said when we talked earlier, this was like when Blood for Blood would play Paper Gangster, and the dudes the song was written about would always homage the hardest. Like this song, like kind of like crossed over genres within hardcore. Like the hard hitters will come out for this one, but yeah, it's a good one. The bass line in the beginning sick. Zev has a great bass tone.
No exceptions. Yeah, that was my when I wrote that. I was so at the time, like the Chung King LP was like I guess it was released on like Lost and Found. So Lost and Found used to put out like re-releases of albums and stuff, and so it's the first time I heard. I can't quite remember the title of the song, but it's literally a complete rip off of a Judge song. I don't remember the name of the song, but I know it's on the it's off of one of the Chung King songs, Chung King album. Sorry. And so I went based on that. I was like, I want to write something in that same key, but similar, but not, but I want it to sound like a Judge song. And that's kind of what it came out like.
Persevere.
That's my attempt of doing like a Killing Time song, like that whole end mod, that that was my idea of like making a song sound like a Killing Time riff. So, yeah, but I really like that song, and I hold it dear to my heart. I love the lyrics. I think the lyrics are incredible, and it really touches, because I've known Porter since about '88, and Steve McVeigh, and I know it's like a personal one about Steve, and Steve's a great guy, and it was interesting to hear Porter's perspective from like the straight edge perspective on that.
Not one of my favorites, but it's a good song. Lyrically, I wrote this one about Steve McVeigh, like a kid I grew up going to hardcore shows with when he broke edge. Remember when we saw it, bound by the oath to the day we fucking die. I wrote those lyrics about him. We were always friends. We're still friends to this day, but he was the inspiration for that one.
Deep Inside.
I think Zev might have wrote this one. I don't really got much to say about it. It's not one of my favorites, and I don't not like it. It's a little long.
You're crazy. The song was like, what, 90 seconds?
I thought it was long. No, I don't know.
None of your songs are long, dude.
I don't know. Just the mosh part at the end, like dan, 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 dan. It's not my favorite.
Deep Inside. That was written at Freehold. I was in between. At the time, I think I just sold my bass and I was buying a new bass guitar, so I didn't have any guitars. So I had a riff in my head. So Kingshot and I went to Freehold Music, and I picked up an acoustic guitar, and I was like, oh, I got this song, and I played it, whatever else. So I think I was buying a bass head at the time and buying a bass. So, but I showed him Deep Inside. I kind of finished writing it on an acoustic guitar. We would just go to music stores and sit there and jam and play like acoustics or electrics or basses, and that was our way of like, if we couldn't play at his house, we'd go to like music stores and just start jamming on something. And so that was written at Freehold Music, which is about 30 minutes from my house at the time. It's no longer there, but on an acoustic guitar.
The record is recorded and mixed June 10th to 12th, 1996 at Sweetwood Sound Studios, Parsippany, New Jersey. What are your general memories of recording?
The engineer, his name was Alap Momin. He was referred to us through Brett Beach, who was putting out the 7-inch, from Charles from Rorschach. He had said that this guy had a studio in Parsippany. He was reasonable. Like, he was starting to get his stuff together, so he was like taking on as many bands as he could, just like build up his catalog. And it was in his house. I think we did vocals in his garage, something in a couple rooms in the downstairs of his house. He was an ex hardcore guy, played in like some skinhead bands. I'm not sure. I don't remember their name now. I don't think Zev will know either, but he was a good guy. We banged it out pretty quick. It went by in a couple days. Alap he was good. He was a good guy.
So the engineer was Alap. This guy Alap Momin. I think Chris Zusai was the one that brought him in, and I think it had something to do with Lifetime. I think Lifetime did like a recording for something for a couple comp tracks, and Chris is like, oh, this guy's got a home studio, whatever. We could give this a shot, and we went in there and we did the demo with him, and he had like a hardcore background, He was familiar with like the Cro-Mags. He used to go to City Gardens and like CB shows. He's like a Cro-Mags fan and like Bad Brains and whatnot, like Murphy's Law, stuff like that, like the older New York bands, Agnostic Front. So he had like a good idea of what we were going for.
My name is Alap Momin. I had a Sweetwood Sound recording studio set up in my parents' basement in Parsippany, New Jersey. Started in 1993, and I had the pleasure of recording tons of hardcore, indie, punk, jazz, metal, hip hop, all kinds of music from that time. And I was the guy responsible for the Floorpunch demo and 7-inch, I believe.
Yeah, what do you remember about the recording session for the Floorpunch Division I Champ 7-inch?
I don't have a ton of recollection, but I can tell you two things that stand out clearly. I remember when they first called, I believe it was Bill, the guitar player, and they asked me to make it sound like Youth of Today. And I remember being like, what? No, it's going to be better than Youth of Today. Because I was, getting into recording and wanted everything to sound huge, Led Zeppelin drums, gigantic guitars or whatever. And to me, it was funny that there was this band, this was like, I think 95 at this point, that was like referencing this, kind of not so great sounding record from, 80 something. So I do remember that. And then when they showed up, it was total like the 80s varsity, like all that straight edge kind of youth crew we used to call it in the 80s. They showed up straight youth crew, like 50 of them. And that was the other thing I remember is literally a van pulled up to my parents' house. The studio was in the basement. And literally I looked out the window and I see like it was like a clown car, like 55 people got out of this van. And I guess it was because they wanted them all to do like the gang vocals, the backing vocals. So literally those are the two things. I remember they were very into the youth crew thing. And I thought it was kind of funny on the phone. But then when they showed up, I was like, no, this is legit. We're going to make this shit sound like Youth of Today. Okay, let's go.
How close do you think you got?
Honestly, I think it sounds better than Youth of Today, but that's just because the technology had just gotten a little bit better by the time we were making the records and all that. Youth of Today, that's early hardcore. There was just no precedent, and they were still trying to record them like they were punk records, but they weren't really punk. Then they were trying to record them like they were metal records, and they weren't really metal. So there was this kind of in-between period of like 87 to like, I don't know, almost like 91, that you have this certain kind of recording that I just love. And I feel like Floorpunch really nailed that sound. It's not really hardcore. I mean, it's not really metal. It's not really punk. It's truly hardcore,
A lot of people talk about how great the bass tone is on that record. Do you remember doing anything special to get that sound?
I don't, but I will say, I make dance records these days. I make 808, like booty records. I've been making hip hop records for almost just as long as I've been making metal records at this point. So I always just had a big low end. I remember mastering guys, I did a Painted by Black album about 16, 17 years ago. And I remember the mastering guy saying, wow, you put bass on a punk record. And I remember just always pushing for more low end than the bands usually wanted. But also I have to give the credit to Mark Zev, the bass player. He was also in a band called Endeavor that I had worked with. And on both the Endeavor records and the Floorpunch material, he's the bass player. And I got to say, he had a Rick. I don't remember. I think he had the 8x10 Ampeg fridge. He just had everything right. I think it was the SVT head. And he just knew how to play. And he knew how to play for hardcore. Again, I can't stress it enough. When you try to make hardcore records sound too punk or too metal, they lose something. There's something right in the middle when really good hardcore records nail it. And I think Zev had that with the bass tone. So we were able to really like gank it up and make it loud, and it didn't get in the way. It just really supported really nice. So
did any of the songs come out better or worse than you expected going in?
Everything came out the way I pretty much expected it would come out. I think for the 7-inch, I liked my bass sound a lot better. Like I picked up a Blues Driver pedal. So I wanted to add like a little growl, a little something that bites a little better on the recordings. And so like that was the first time I used like any kind of like a pedal or anything. And then I just, use that in every live show going forward. And then eventually added like a Sanzem pedal to just get a little more compressed sound with that like a distortion growl. But yeah, like I think that the bass sound came out much better, as we move forward with each recording.
How did you come up with the sequencing for the record?
Well, like I think, well, we used a couple songs from the demo. Persevere, I guess, and Changes. So we didn't want to use those like out front. So we stuck those in the middle, and we liked the energy of Not For Me for the A side. And then just starting out with like Porter came up. I think we all saw the movie Casino together, and and we took the sound bite from that, and we're like, oh, let's put this. We'll start the B side with with that little, guys from other crews get away with a warning. Everybody else watch out. We liked opening with Not For Me for the 7-inch, No Exceptions for the second side. And then Deep Inside has kind of like that ending for a 7-inch. It works, and so that was the sequencing, which just pretty much went in the order of that. We just stuck the other songs in between.
How did it feel to hear the songs played back for the first time in the studio?
In the studio, it sounded great. It's funny because to me, every recording sounds phenomenal in the studio, but then when I get at home and listen to it like over and over, I start picking up all these little nuances that I don't like, and then I just never listen to it again after that. I'm like, that drives me up the wall. Or this bothers me, and so. But that's just I think all artists do that. So in a way, I wouldn't call myself an artist. I'm just a guy that played. So, but yeah, it's funny because like I said, whenever you're in the studio, it just sounds fantastic. And I don't know if it's just from listening to it over and over and over and over, prior to being released, but you always find little things little tidbits you don't like or you dislike. But it sounded great when we were there mixing it.
Do you remember the first time you were able to listen to the album by yourself and how you felt about it? Maybe before those insecurities crept in?
I was super psyched on it. I definitely shared it with all my friends. I know every time we made frequent trips down to Virginia Beach with Endeavor. We play with with Channel and Jesuit. So anytime I was down there, I'd stay with Dave Brown, and I would just give him tidbit. I'm like, oh, we've recorded 7-inch. Here's a copy of 7-inch. Here's this, here's that, and and everybody was psyched on it. Everyone that I gave it to was like, dude, this is awesome. This is even better than how did you top the demo with this? So everybody was, the response from friends and stuff was great. So I was really excited about it.
I'm sure at that point it was in a cassette in my car, and I thought it was cool. I was happy with the way it came out. For me, being the first band I was in, at this point, we had 7-inch era where we had top of the hype for us. So I was pretty stoked when I heard it, and I was proud that, I was on this record, and, I knew Brett was going to do a good job putting it out.
Can you talk about the importance of a hardcore band putting out a 7-inch in the 90s?
Yeah. I mean, just you hear people say it's so tongue in cheek, oh, we found our bands through zines and thank lists, putting out a 7-inch was the next step for the band. You did a demo, that was the formula: demo, 7-inch LP, break up. That was our mission statement: 7-inch, demo, 7-inch LP, break up. You know what I mean? Just come in, hit them, and get out. Not make it stale. But yeah, a 7-inch was important. That was the next step. You're not pressing many of them. I'm not sure the exact information, but definitely less than 1,000 in the first press, I would think. And, that's how you would ship them off to distributors. Really, no social media at the time, no music sharing services. You dub it on a cassette, listen to it in your car, and pass it around to the next guy. I remember when we recorded, the demo and the 7-inch and even the LP, just taking cassettes from the studio and just playing it for friends in our car. We'd sit out in the car and listen to it, and their reaction was pretty cool. And that's how I kind of knew people would be into it, just judging by my friends liking it.
7-inch was the big step from, I guess, most bands, at least for me, it was always a demo or a 7-inch, but a 7-inch was such a to-do to get that out. An album was that was a whole another thing, but just having a 7-inch out, it just felt like you just really made a big accomplishment, So it was very exciting, it's exciting to put out a 7-inch. I don't know how that, I'm sure now in today's day and age with the way recordings are done. And I mean, you could basically record at home in a studio. You could do whatever. You could do home recordings. You could put stuff up in Bandcamp. You could do, so just having that 7-inch to me was something tangible to hold. It was great. I like that idea. And that was just such a hardcore thing. It's only in hardcore music do you have that little, where people release 7-inches. That doesn't happen anymore, So I don't know. To me, it was awesome. It was a great thing.
What are your thoughts on the art for the album, and how did you decide on the front and back photos?
It's kind of funny, we just thought, Chris and I, especially, a little older than the other guys, we went to CB's a lot when we were younger, and just being able to play there was a pretty amazing thing. And our first show there was great. I think we played there 4 or 5 times, and, everyone was awesome. So we thought just, the main goal was trying to get a good one from CBGB's to be the cover. And the back cover is the crew shot, right?
That's right.
Yeah, we just took that from just getting all our friends together. That's actually Mike Kingshot's basement. We got a bunch of different, Mark's brothers in there, Tim Mouthpiece, some other kids from the Shore, Dan Servon. I was just getting our friends together. We called it just the crew shot, just everyone hanging out. That wasn't an unregular thing. That was our crew. Like, we hung out, we went to shows together, went out to eat together all the time,
So the art, like, we pretty much wanted to do something that looked like what we grew up listening to and what we grew up buying. We wanted to look like the Instead 7-inch, like the Side by Side 7-inch, like the Youth Today 7-inch. Like, we wanted to emulate that. So it was like, it had to be the Varsity Letters. We had to have that CBGB shot, and like just that whole idea of like, oh my God, we're going to play CBs, and we got to make sure we have photographers there, like it was a big thing. So, we got a couple good shots. I think I wasn't sure. I don't know if Justin DeMatrix took them or if Tracy Bergman, Tracy McMahon took those shots, but we had photographers at like, all the early shows. So we wanted that live energy shot because we wanted that to carry over in the music, the way the live shows were. So, and I think we accomplished that. We had a pretty good, cool looking 7-inch cover. And then the back, like, we wanted that hangout. Like, we want our crew, our friends, everybody that helped us along the way. We wanted to, have in that picture. So we tried to like get a date set where we could get some friends or whatever else. And whoever showed, obviously we did. Like, there's some people that I really wanted in there that couldn't make it, but still, we had like everybody was there for the most part, the important players.
What are your thoughts on the completed album, like the full thing, when you finally have the physical copy in your hand?
Stoked on the layout. Thought it came out great. Is what the collegiate font, with the Floorpunch logo to the back cover with the song titles, the pictures, the gatefold, the way the 7-inch opened up, with the lyrics inside. I thought it looked great. I thought Brett did a great job. We put a lot of time into that thanks list. We were happy with everything. I was stoked, and then the prospectus of of Brett being like a record collector and him wanting to do some colored vinyl. Everyone was stoked on the 88 on colored vinyl, which there was actually 90 on colored vinyl. They would only do an even pressing amount, and I got the 2 that were unnumbered. But yeah, we were stoked. We were happy. No one had any complaints with the way it came out.
Do you harbor any personal guilt that I never got a copy on gold?
Now that I know you and, we met each other a long time ago. Yeah, guilt, no, but you're a solid enough guy that you would have got one. I mean, they went to people far worse than you. Trust me.
Respect. Did the Floorpunch fan base grow after the release of the 7-inch?
I think it did. We were pretty. I mean, the fan base was going pretty strong. Up to and through the 7-inch. Like, I don't know if it grew. I can't quite sure whether if it grew, but the scene in general did grow. Like that whole, like the whole rebirth of that style of hardcore was pretty strong. And I think we definitely helped contribute to that. And like whether if it grew after the 7-inch, I would say it was just as strong, but I don't know if it grew any larger. We did start doing a lot of shows with H2O, and those shows, like H2O was kind of blowing up at the time, and those shows were definitely big. And then Underdog reunited, so we were doing shows with Underdog too, and so the shows were definitely getting better. We were getting on better shows.
Do you have any standout shows from this period that are? So this is post 7-inch, pre LP.
I'd say the record release of H2O, not the record release. It was a video shoot for My Friends Look Out, Be You Like Family, whatever the song is, But it was awesome because like they asked one band. He was like, "We're only having one band play, and it's going to be you guys." So it was a sold out thing, and like when we walked down like from St. Mark's down to CB's, like from the path, and you saw the line wrapped around CBGB's, and it was just again, you get the butterflies in your stare, like, oh my God, there's so many people here. We're playing this is like a CB's like a real CB's matinee, not like, 100 people in there. This is it, and so that show was great. It was an incredible show. And then H2O, like when, after we played, H2O did like a bunch of takes for their video and then did like a condensed set version after that. But it was great. It was, we really packed the place for them. So it was good.
Shows up at First and Second Church in Boston were great. Played a couple times in DC, did a weekend in Virginia Beach. And we played that Yuletide Fest. What year do you think that was? With the Robbie, there was a flyer with like the Youth of Today fist holding a candy cane. That had to have been 97. That era was great. Like I said, 96, 97 was the time when Floorpunch was hitting its hardest. But standout shows, the shows at CB's were great. Just being able to play there was amazing. Chatham, I think might have been the greatest show we ever played as a band. It was in New Jersey, North Jersey. There might have been 800 to 1,000 people there. That was like a coming out show. That might have been the show. You can ask Zev where. That might have been the first show we sold the 7-inch at. Chatham. But I could be wrong. We got to cross-reference that.
Dude, the best show was early 99, Oxnard. Come on.
Laser Star.
That's right.
That was cool.
That's right.
California was a blast.
What bands did you play with the most at this time? And are there any bands that you had a unique connection with?
I would say Mouthpiece. They really looked out for us. We owed so much to them. Tim, and those guys did everything they could to get us on all their shows, big or small, and they really carried the way for us. So, also as well, Killing Time, we played a bunch of shows with them. They looked out for us. The guys who book shows at CB's seem to look out for us a lot as well, So if I had to pick one, I would definitely say Mouthpiece. Like the Blood for Bloods and Death Threats, that might have been a little later, but we played a bunch of shows with them. But at this era, definitely Mouthpiece.
Ensign, we played a lot with Ensign and In My Eyes, and even 10-Yard Fight. But 10-Yard Fight was weird because there was like that whole falling out with Anthony Papalardo, like getting kicked out, and we kind of were like Team Anthony. So when In My Eyes started, like we kind of gravitated to playing with them more than 10-Yard Fight. But I'd say those bands, Hands Tied and Rancor, also out of Pennsylvania. Rancor and Atari, we would do shows with like quite frequently. And even time flies. Like anytime we would do Virginia Beach or they'd come up here, we'd try to get some shows together with them. But and then H2O and then Underdog. Like we happen to get on every, like Russ was pretty great with that. With at the time, like any younger bands that were drawing pretty well, he'd get us on the bill with them. So, and Killing Time. I think we did a few shows with Killing Time, Murphy's Law. Also, they were great to us, both bands.
What year do you think this Roots hardcore revival was at its peak in your area, and also like the East Coast in general?
I'd say like I guess 96 was like 95 and 96 was the peak for me at least in our area. I think Philly got better as time went on, like through like 96, 97, 98, like Philadelphia just as New Jersey would kind of wane, like, then Philly would pick up and DC would have like every city like would get better if like one of the other cities dropped off. So it was kind of a good balance.
If we're looking at like that youth crew revival era that you're involved in kicking off, like what do you think were the defining bands and albums of that era?
If I were to put together, like, you would have to say 10-Yard Fight, right?
100%.
This might be a weird one, but, because they were local, Rain on the Parade, they were kind of cool, a little different, but, we played a lot of shows with them. Then you had the Rancors and the Ataris. They were a little on the smaller scale. And then later on you had In My Eyes, Ensign was a New Jersey hardcore band, but, they wouldn't be part of the youth crew scene. That wasn't really their thing. But definitely 10-Yard Fight, Ourselves, Blade Crasher. At some point, maybe a little later on, Hands Tied, Mouthpiece. And, again, a little later, like I would say like late 97 or early 97, In My Eyes. So, yeah, I would say that those are like the big three. Maybe us, TYF and In My Eyes. Fast Break, to an extent, they weren't really a youth crew band. I mean, they were early on, but they changed pretty quick.
So that's a tough one for me because I guess with playing with Endeavor, I was more influenced by the bands that we would play with that band than that I'd play with Floorpunch. Because Floorpunch, it all kind of sounded the same in a way, and I like that style of music, but like to me, if I was going to listen to that, I'm going to listen to Youth Today. I'm going to listen to Judge. I'm going to listen to like Breakdown. I'm going to listen to Killing Time. I'm not going to listen to like the peers of that, if that makes sense, because that's what I grew up with. So for me, 108 came out with their third record at the time, and I'm not quite sure what the title of it was, but I got a pre-recording of that, and to me that record was incredible. And Lifetime's like Hello Bastards and Jersey's Best Dancers, I think were great records. I was a Hot Warrior Music guy, so like Forever and Counting, and then the release after that, both two great records. Like that was for me. They were my influences in a weird way, even though it didn't sound like that when we wrote the Floorpunch record. But that's what I was listening to for the most part when it came to hardcore punk. And then of course, like the Black Dots reissue came out then. So any reissues that came out, everything went black. They did like the Black Flag, everything went black, like double album thing. All that stuff to me was like, oh, there's stuff that I haven't heard or stuff that wasn't available before. So I would just kind of dig deeper into hardcore and punk as releases were re-released. And of course you had Lost and Found. So you'd get Calls for Alarm release. Oh, Agnostic Front, Live at Seabees, all these different things would pop up. So like a lot of it was older stuff that I would listen to, but it was just, but so I wasn't really listening to I couldn't tell you like 10 Yard Fight. I couldn't even tell you what the demo sounds like. And I couldn't tell you like a name of like a In My Eyes album or even a Handside 7-inch, or a song off of it. Selfishly, I don't know. So, but I was, in my own little world of like writing music and doing my own thing and working and, and then listening to music that I grew up listening to.
At what point do you think that style got oversaturated and what killed it?
I don't know if it I don't think it really got oversaturated. I just think everybody just kind of moved on after a while. Like when Ink and Dagger came out, I thought that was a breath of fresh air because it was something different within that, but still like hardcore. It still sounded like a hardcore band, but they did something different, with it. And eventually, like the way, like when Shark Attack after Floorpunch, as everything died down and bands were breaking up, like Shark Attack, American Nightmare, it started going in a different direction. And I think it was a good progression because these bands were still keeping those fast parts and keeping that like New York Revelation Records like style of hardcore music alive in a sense.
As you can see with evidence, even like with hardcore these days, the style changes all the time. People are looking to, push the boundaries and do something new. And when you have a whole show of 7 or 8, 9, 10 bands all sounding the same, it can get old pretty quick. And, I think that's what happened. People were looking for something new. Hardcore is a young man's game. There's always younger kids doing something a little different. And, I think that's what happened. We always said, as soon as the show started to get lame, we were going to break up. And I remember we played one show in particular after our tour. I know this is like not what we're talking about right now, but it was at the Melody in New Brunswick. It was with Kill Your Idols. And I remember they just got such a better response. And I was like, you know what, this has got to be it. I'm not going to fart around playing crappy shows to 20 people. Like, we're going to go out on the high and just call it quits.
Where do you think the Floorpunch 7-inch fits into the history of New Jersey hardcore and also hardcore in general?
This is a tough one because I was always, like I said earlier, a self-deprecating Floorpunch fan. I thought the band was cool, but it wasn't my favorite kind of music. I was always into a little harder stuff, like the breakdowns and the raw deals and stuff. And, this is a tough question for me because, I would just say we were like a pimple on the butt of hardcore, but, I think other people seem to think differently. As far as New Jersey, I don't know. New Jersey had some sick bands, AOD, Misfits, even like small like Resurrections, 108s. There's a lot of bands from Jersey, even other bands from the shore. But, New Jersey, like I said, middle to upper tier. As far as big picture, I would say like lower tier.
I think just from the lore and the 80 on gold and like the from the collection, like the collector's perspective, it's a pretty important record, I guess. But I don't like musically, like that's tough for me to like, I don't know. It's hard for me to answer because I don't like, I played on it. So like, how do I answer that?
Well, you're removed. It's been 25 years.
Yeah. So I guess it was important, it was, I guess it was pretty important for that time. Like when you go back and you follow like hardcore from like 1990, 91, 92, 93, and then you get to that era, it's definitely like an important record. It made its mark, I think,
Yeah. Do you think there's a reason why this 7-inch holds up compared to like its contemporaries of that era?
I think, I don't know. I think it's just the formula of our songwriting in a weird way. Like, there was something about like, I don't know, like even now, like when we started doing the reunion stuff, I would say to Kingshot, I'm like, how are we still going? Like, how do we, like, we'll play a show and people go fucking crazy, and like, and the show's packed and we go out to California and it's great. But then like other bands have tried it, the reunion thing and doing that, it just doesn't stand the test of time. So I guess there's something there in our music that carries over still, So I guess it has to do with our style of writing or our style of playing or just our vibe that we had, that whole controversy of like, oh, these guys are this jock band. These guys they just say what they want to say and they do what they want to do or whatever, or, they will, stand up for themselves. Like, I guess that whole, like, it's still punk in a way, having that attitude, like, so, even though they're like, oh, this jock band that just says things and I don't know. But to me, that's how it's all punk, dude. It's all still, we're a hardcore band. We're not going to get up there and sugarcoat it, So I think that goes over well. I think that stood the test of time. And we're all, we still pretty much stand by our words outside of, me and Kingshot not being straight edge. So, but when it comes to friends and our friendship, like that to me is stronger than anything else, like that. Like the bonds that we have as a band and, within that, the hardcore community, I still have, some of my best friends I still go to hardcore shows, like I'm still involved, not, as much as I was involved back then, but I still pay attention.
This is Brett Beach from New Jersey. I did In My Blood Records and Hardware Fanzine.
Can you discuss how Hardware Fanzine, In My Blood Records, and Floorpunch are all intertwined?
Sure. So I knew Mark from when we were basically kids, Porter, that is. And I started the fanzine with my friend Dave in the early 90s. So we had already known each other. And while the zine was going on, Mark kind of got back into the scene. And he was away at college for a little bit. And, in that time I had become friends with Bill and Zev. And Zev was friends with Kingshot. And, now Porter's back in the scene. And I had interviewed Resurrection and became friends with those guys. So I was friends with Zuzai. And previous to that, I was friends with Geoff. So it all kind of mixed together into a group of friends now. And, Floorpunch just kind of came together, friendships being formed at the time.
Can you discuss how you went about choosing the different limited variations for the Floorpunch 7-inch?
Yes. So I had wanted to do a record label. And I didn't want to do like a really serious record label, putting out like hundreds of records. I just thought it would be a fun thing to do. Maybe couple it with the zine or something like that. So I was looking for something to do. And if I was going to do something, I figured I would do it like the way Revelation Records did it in the early days. They put out a quote unquote regular pressing, that they sold, in stores and through the mail and stuff like that. And that shows with a limited edition component to it, like the Together 7-inch, he put out 1,000 on black and, then like a couple hundred on orange. And they did the same thing with Sick of It All and, Warzone before that. So I thought that was a cool model to do. And being a record collector myself, I thought that was a cool idea. And I would sell them, individually or just give them out. So when Floorpunch came together, it seemed like a perfect opportunity to start that record label. And I just kind of took it from there and got advice from people I needed to get advice from to figure out how to actually do a record. And that all came together pretty easily. And then when it came time to order them, I said, well, 1,000 seems like a good number. So I'm going to get 1,000 on black. And I want to do a limited edition. I don't know, 200, 250. It probably seems like too much. So I'm going to get 100. And then somebody said, we should get 88. That would be cool. All right. That does sound cool. I'll see if I can get 88. And then we had to figure out what color to get it on. And I kind of remember saying, I think gold would be cool. Because I was thinking of that fourth pressing of the Together 7-inch, the clear yellow, which we always called gold. So that's pretty much how it happened. I said, all right, I'll try to get 88. And I spoke to the guy at the pressing plant, and he was giving me a hard time about why I wanted such a stupid amount. And I said, well, give me as close as you can get to 88. And if it goes over, that's fine too. So he ended up sending me 90 on gold vinyl, and it worked out perfect. That's pretty much it.
And the 2 unnumbered ones, Porter has them.
Yeah, he wanted the unnumbered ones, so he got them. I think he still has them.
I heard a rumor once that you got 100 on gold and 12 were broken and thrown into the ocean. Nothing true on that.
No, that's not true at all, but I'm sure one of us made it up one day when we were just shooting the shit in the parking lot or at a show or something like that, because it seemed like something stupid we would do.
What was the impact of Floorpunch in 1995 and 96 in New Jersey and also the greater Northeast?
I think the impact was bringing people together. It seemed like there was people, some we knew, some we didn't, in pockets all over the scene around here, just kind of waiting for an opportunity to rally around something like that. And you could see it starting to happen with Cornerstone, right? Because Cornerstone came out and people got their demo and just kind of gravitated towards that. But, when Floorpunch started, like guys that we hadn't really seen or gone to shows with in a while kind of came back and they were interested in it. And people that we knew from shows, now we knew their names, they were coming to shows. So everybody just kind of came together. It was almost like the universe forming, it was like gravity pulling people in together. And we really didn't know it at the time, but it seemed like a whole like subset of the scene just kind of formed like a mushroom cloud around it. And not to say that Floorpunch was exclusive here, because it's been covered a million times, but you had 10-Yard Fight pretty much forming at the same time up in Boston, and we had Rain on the Parade over here in Philly, but it all kind of like pulled together. So when I think about those times, that's what comes to mind.
What do you think the legacy of the Floorpunch 7-inch is, both in New Jersey and then for hardcore in general?
Yeah, I think the legacy is just kind of like this, like for people who didn't know us or weren't there then, it must seem like some kind of a mystique, like the way we thought about, SSD and Minor Threat and stuff like that. Like, this thing exists. It's cool. We like it. The times when it was fresh must have been so cool. I want to be part of it. So it just still resonates with people, I think. I mean, when Floorpunch plays shows and stuff, there's always a lot of people there, and from all generations, right down to young hardcore kids. I mean, even the young teenagers and stuff, they seem to know about Floorpunch. So it's just another like rung in the ladder of hardcore that just seems to stick throughout history. I mean, I wasn't there for SSD and Minor Threat and stuff like that, but when I think of hardcore youth of today, right? I mean, when they started, I was just a little teenager. That's what you go to. And Floorpunch just kind of added right into that legacy. And I hope it continues that way.
What's up, everyone? It's Daniel Sant, best dressed man on the pod. And I am here to talk about one of the greatest straight edge 7-inches of all time. Now, tons of people will think, well, this isn't from the late 80s. Who gives a fucking shit? This bodies so much that's come before it and so much that came after it. This is a stone cold classic for a reason. 6 songs, all of them perfect. all of them fast, all of them having awesome breaks, all of them just being steeped in hardcore knowledge and worship, but also forging a new path. Now, let's also think about the time when this was coming out. In this time period, in this decade, hardcore had gone very metal. And you can hear the anger and the desperation to latch on to a hardcore that was loved by the members of this band, to bring out something that was treasured and something that was, I wouldn't say being forgotten, but something that wasn't the sound of the day. And this was a way that a band cultivated an amazing love letter to the records that they loved, but while still forging new path and having such an amazing sound. This thing starts out, you put it on, you drop the needle, and then it jumps into Not For Me. Now I can see it. First line, it's just telling you what's gone wrong. It's not going to fucking happen with this crew. And that's what you get from Floorpunch. This is a tight group, not only just the band members, but they had the Floorpunch crew. And these are people that were associated also with the hardware zine and everything. And this was specifically saying, I don't give a fuck about what's popular today. This is not going to happen in this. This 7-inch is going to be pure youth crew hardcore with NYHC bleeding into the cracks. It is absolutely perfect. So it opens with Not For Me, and that song is just incredible. It is a mission statement. It's just the most pure hardcore song. It's so great. And then it goes into Changes. And as an edgeman, this song it ticks all my boxes. It is absolutely perfect. I really love the fact that it's angry, but at the same time, it's still saying it's, giving the same thing, as the Judge 7-inch. It's telling you, you don't need the drugs, you don't need the beer, the edge. All of these things are positive ways forward, but yet it's still got that underbelly of anger. It's still got that grittiness, and that's just what makes the best hardcore songs. And Floorpunch absolutely thrive in that way. Next up, you've got Stick Together. The highlight of this song for me is when the music takes over as the vocals end, and it just goes into that mid-tempo mosh that I could listen to on a loop for the rest of my life. It's perfect hardcore. There's so many times, some of those other songs have much better vocal catchiness and parts in it that you'll always remember. You'll always sing along so hard, and when you're listening to it at your home doing bed dives and all of that, or driving and just being so psyched. But the way this mosh comes in at the end, it is the spirit that, it's needed in this world. I cannot say enough about that just little piece of music, which is the hardest fucking mid-tempo mosh. I love it so much. So then you flip the record and you get No Exceptions. Dedication is what you like. Oh my God. It's so fucking sick, and this really flexes the anger that is built into Floorpunch. Floorpunch don't seem like they're an approachable group of dudes, even though you can tell they're all having fun with each other. But if you're not in their circle, you're not welcome. And that's how it felt to me. Even though, there was tons of people that sang along always. When they came through, lots of people, made friends with them. The Oxnard kids, became their West Coast crew and all of that. And then they came up to San Francisco and beat the shit out of some Nazis. So, you got to love that as well. But there's something about it. There's a little bit of mystique that goes with, and I think it's just shown in No Exceptions is like, this is fucking anger, and I love it. Then next you go to Persevere, and this is the classic like, fuck you, you sold out. I thought we were gonna be through this through thick and thin together, and you didn't, And lots of people all over the critical world are gonna say, oh yeah, it's a stab in the back song, we've heard a million of those. I don't give a fuck. This is hardcore punk. This is what this shit is all about. And a straight edge stabbed in the back, like, you broke edge and I'm still here song, I'll be here till the fucking end of time to hear. I love it. And then next, it closes with Deep Inside. I absolutely love this. To me, this song has always been one of those ones where you're expressing... Zack and I have discussed in the past, like, we love those hardcore songs that look back on the generation before and say, well, you fucking, like, you never did it. Like, this to me gives me those vibes. Because the feeling I have runs deep inside. This 7-inch also features just classic, 96, 97 looking live shots. It just makes you wish you were every single one of these shows that is shown. And you know what? I think this is an absolute perfect 7-inch. I love it more today than I did then. And I'll love it more in 10 years than I do today. It's one of those things that will never get old, and it will keep growing, and it'll be one of those treasured things. And there's no wonder that their records now go for more than some of the classic things that they were referencing musically. And just one last thing. If anyone has a Floorpunch on gold they want to give your boy, get in touch.
Yeah, if you got two, you hit up Dan, but your other boy first.
I'm Brian Clevo Ristow. I played bass in 10 Yard Fight, Right Brigade, Stop and Think, In the Red, and a couple times in Invasion, and I love Floorpunch. I first heard Floorpunch on the demo. John LaCroix gave me the demo one night shortly after I had met him. He figured that it would be something I would be into, and I took it. I got in my car, and I had a pretty short drive back to my place and started listening to the demo and was so blown away by it. I actually just drove around up and down Sturo Drive listening so I could listen to the demo a couple of times. And it was just really from that point on, I've been a fan. Floorpunch, luckily, Boston was one of the places that they played regularly. They came up and played a bunch of shows. Before I was in 10 Yard Fight, I was roadieing, and we did a couple shows with them together. So we became pretty good friends with those guys. Would see them, all over the Northeast. Couple other times, I drove down to the last, and I'm making air quotes when I say it, the last Mouthpiece show in Princeton. Floorpunch played, and Mark didn't really have a mic because the mic got broken, and basically a bunch of kids were singing along into his fist as he was holding it out in front of the crowd. So really, what a great band. And, the demo really stands as one of the best demos of that 97 Youth Crew Revival era. But the 7-inch just takes it to another level. It just kicks in with Not For Me. And, what started as, a band that, many people would probably say, including the guys in the band, would say, it's really influenced by Judge. Mark said that he listened to the Judge 7-inch and then, went and wrote the lyrics to the demo in like, a very short time. So it was a huge Judge influence. The 7-inch, I think, really is what sets it apart from that, Youth Crew Revival era, because of the influence of most notably Straight Ahead and other bands like, Breakdown, and Raw Deal. But I think that the straight ahead influence really comes out because it's a lot faster, but there's still that anger, and and it's still like just 100% straight edge record. Everything about this record is great. It's short, it's fast, it's angry. It is a perfect example of what a straight edge hardcore record should sound like, and just sort of the aura that's around it too. The 88 records on gold where they supposedly throw 12 of them into the ocean, which I think is a hilarious rumor that people probably still believe. And making that gold vinyl record, for the collector nerds out there, just like one of the most valuable records of the time. Just the aura around them, the fact that they didn't really play a lot of shows outside of the Northeast, the photos of their show and of their infamous show in San Francisco, and just really going on, making an LP, because as I've said on this podcast many times, writing a hardcore LP is fucking hard. And, while the LP doesn't stand up to what the 7-inch is, they still wrote a great LP, and have a comp track that is one of their best songs too. So, their entire career, but the 7-inch I think is really the shining achievement of the Floorpunch career. And, aside from that, I'm glad to, still call them friends, and, got to see them, earlier this year at the Matt Summers benefit. They got back together, which is probably going to be their last show for now, at least, just, to take care of one of their friends and really just coming out for them, because that's just the type of people they are. So, Floorpunch, is one of the best, if not the best, and one of my favorite bands from the 90s youth crew revival era. And it's just a fucking great record, and we're lucky to have it.
Hey, my name is Todd Jones. I was born in Oxnard, California. I spent the last 20 plus years playing in hardcore bands, such as Carry On, Terror, Nails, and a handful of others. I was 15 years old when the Floorpunch 7-inch arrived in my mailbox in 1996. At the time, I was really into punk rock. I was getting into the Revelation Records back catalog, Victory Records catalog, and any New York hardcore band I could find. All that stuff really intrigued me. At the time, I really just wanted to hear anything that resembled a hardcore band and learn as much about it as I could. I was more drawn to the faster stuff that I was listening to, opposed to some of the slower stuff I was discovering. Bands that were more inspired by the Discord Records catalog than the Roadrunner catalog, which is certainly still the case. I had met and was friends with Fred Hammer a year or so before that, and he had recently gotten a hold of Hardware Fanzine number 8. I don't know if he was distributing it or if he just had a handful of copies, but he gave me one, and inside it there was this ad that I was really intrigued by, and it was for the Floorpunch 7-inch, and it showed a picture of what clearly looked to be a hardcore band. The singer it was like a close-up picture of the singer yelling with a crowd of kids around him. I think he might have had like his arm around one of the kids or something, but it looked really, just looked really cool. So I mail ordered the record, which was probably like $3.50. I had just sent in the letter, and a couple of weeks later I got the record back and whatnot. But I got that 7-inch the day after Christmas, December 1996, and a few days prior to receiving the Floorpunch 7-inch, I had got the Rain on the Parade body bag 7-inch in the mail, which I also really liked. And through Hardware Fanzine, I was really learning a lot about the New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, tri-state area hardcore scene, which, I've generally liked all the bands that came from there at the time. But But the Floorpunch 7-inch came. I opened up the packaging, and I remember being struck by how it looked. That's the first thing you notice. And the typography was, how the record was laid out. It just looked so well put together. It was very clean and symmetrical, which stylistically reminded me of the Chain of Strength compilation album layout, which I, loved. The music was very exciting in the way that, there were current bands in the U.S. that sounded like the Revelation Records catalog. And I just remember being blown away that, there was a current band that sounded just as good as any of those, first 10 or first 15 Revelation records. And I was really stoked on that because, in the mid to late 90s, none of those bands were playing. They weren't reuniting. They had probably just broken up, 5 to 6 years prior. So, hardcore of that sound was not as prominent in Southern California. We did have some really good bands. We had Ignite. At that time, they were on their album Calling My Brothers, which I still love to this day. We had Strife, and we saw them quite a lot. They were great band. Built to Last in San Diego was good. They kind of resembled more of a heavier New York hardcore band. And then Collision out in, I think, Claremont or Temecula, but we would see them a lot too. But I was really into Floorpunch, probably more so than most things. I think the Floorpunch 7-inch was the best release of its time, and it's still the best at this time. Meaning that I don't think there's been a straight edge hardcore record that has come out since the Floorpunch 7-inch has come out that I think is better. Certainly nothing I've connected with as much. Floorpunch, they had an attitude about them that was 100% hardcore. Every band member looked like they were super into hardcore and were on the same page, which made their band just seem more powerful. One thing I appreciated about Floorpunch was how outspoken they were. They were outspoken about the things they like, and they were also outspoken about the things that they hated, which I also liked because there were things that I also didn't really like at the time as well. And I think one of the most powerful things about Floorpunch was the culture that culminated around their band of a lot of like-minded people from, their peers at the time who were in their 20s, and then to people like myself who were teenagers who were, fans or who are fans. I've established a lot of friendships and had a lot of great times. I remember more than once being at a show in California and seeing someone who I didn't recognize wearing a Floorpunch shirt and, walking up to them and introducing myself to them and talking about Floorpunch. And, a couple of these people are people I've had friendships with for decades. That's, it's pretty impactful for me, but, the impact that Floorpunch would have on my life is just immense, and I can't really explain it. I would just talk for too long, but they were definitely one of the most impactful bands in my life, and the day I got that 7-inch was definitely a very magical day for me. I didn't probably understand how magical it was, but I just remember listening to that 7-inch over and over and over again, looking at the layout, studying it, and just being in awe of it. But the song No Exceptions was and still is my favorite Floorpunch song. I learned how to play the whole record on guitar because I wanted to figure out how they wrote songs. And learning No Exceptions was probably the first time I learned the root, minor second, minor third, major third chord progression which, you know, if you're not a guitar player, it's just know it as one of the most extremely common chord progressions in all kinds of, you know, punk rock, metal, hardcore. It's really dark, ugly, and it just comes off as like really super hard. But that was the first time I learned that chord progression, and it certainly helped me with, you know, creating songs that I played in bands that I've played in. And can't say enough about Floorpunch. They're one of the best bands that I got to experience in real time. I've seen a couple of their reunions, and they're fantastic. Just as good as, actually better than they were when they were a band. And the reason why I say that is because I saw them at a festival in 2012, and it was the best time I've seen them. And they came out to California in January of 1999. You know, my friends and I followed those shows as much as we could. So we got to see them at least 3 times, and they were really great. You know, time I saw them in 2012, they were even better. And, yeah, that's what I got. Thanks a lot.
Hey, Dave Brown from Virginia Beach. Let's talk about Floorpunch. It's hard to talk about Floorpunch really without first speaking to what hardcore was like in 1995, 96. There were some really awesome bands that I loved. You know, I loved Snapcase and Bloodlet. Absolutely thought Dead Guy was one of the best things ever. You know, I was into all the Screamo stuff coming out of the Gravity scene out in San Diego, all the Riot Girl stuff in DC. But in 1995, unless you were listening to Mouthpiece, there was nobody else really playing traditional hardcore as I wanted to hear traditional hardcore. So along came Floorpunch, who basically just turned the whole thing upside down. You know, we went from going to shows, having people speaking into open mic in between hardcore bands, and we had people wearing sweater vests and crying, and there was no dancing at shows, and stage diving wasn't cool. There was nothing less cool than straight edge in 1995, and that made it even more awesome because there's nothing better than being an outsider, especially being an outsider within a scene of people that should be outsiders. And people were just threatened by it. They were absolutely pissed about it, you know? I love that aesthetic. I love that sound. Current and Ordination. All those bands were fantastic, but I really wanted to hear straight edge hardcore, and nobody was playing it. I missed Gorilla Biscuits and Youth of Today. I missed all those bands by like 2 years because either when they played Virginia Beach, I was too young or didn't know about it, or I couldn't get to the shows out of town at Safari or whatever. And despite the fact I was going to a ton of shows, I really wish that I had seen those other bands first. So, you know, I was cutting my teeth on other stuff in the early 90s. And then Floorpunch comes around. And I remember it all started coming out of Endeavor. I loved Endeavor so much. But Endeavor were serious. And they had an agenda. They had a mission. They had a very specific message. And I remember sitting down. Mark Zev and Olander had come down for spring break, probably in 95. And I remember sitting there at Trashmore, and Mark was telling me about this new band that he was going to start. And they were going to call it Floorpunch. And he started laughing because he knew that just by calling a band Floorpunch, it was going to piss off so many people. And I remember him sitting there on the picnic table or whatever, talking to me here at Trashmore. And he's saying, you know, hey, we're going to name our band Floorpunch, and we're going to write songs about being straight edge and moshing. It's going to be fantastic. We're just going to piss off everybody. And that's exactly what they did. He called it from a mile out. The one thing I never really understood about Floorpunch, and maybe it was different because they were all my friends, but everybody thought they were raging pricks. And maybe they were, I don't really know. But honestly, they were some of the nicest, sweetest dudes I had ever met. You know, all the people they hung with, Sayreville, Brett Beach, all super solid guys. Still amazing people to this day, 30 years later. And people back then didn't have any sense of humor. These were some of the nicest people ever, and they were so misunderstood because they would have done anything for their friends. They didn't start fights. They were just normal good dudes.
So this is Geoff TDT, friend of the band, roadie, t-shirt guy, and I just wanted to say a little bit about the Floorpunch 7-inch Division 1 champs. The 7-inch and the band were basically a response to a lot of the things that were going on in the mid-90s. Hardcore had gotten musically kind of watered down and taken in a lot of different directions, some of which were good, some not so good. And it had also become pretty self-serious. So I think the band basically wanted to take a more lighthearted approach and write some music that was a little bit more reminiscent of the stuff that they grew up on. Rev 1 through 10, New York hardcore demos, and the holy trinity of comps, New Breed, The Way It Is, and Where the Wild Things Are. They set out to write 6 songs that basically would get kids moving, get kids singing along, and make it so that they were sort of undeniable live. And really it worked. I mean, as a band, they were able to get into the studio, pump out those 6 songs, and kids went wild when it came out. I mean, the thing is they were a very polarizing band. So you were either 100% on board or you totally weren't interested. There was really no middle ground. They became sort of one of the flag bearers for that mid-90s scene. And in the end, they're probably the one that people remember the most, even though at the time, I can't say that they were the most popular of them. To me, the 7-inch and the band in general was really their love letter to hardcore, to the hardcore scene they grew up on, and to all the music that made them who they are as people. It's tough to not let myself smile a little bit when I hear a song like Stick Together, and I think that, 30-something years later, I've known some of these guys, and we are all still friends, and we do stick together.
Greetings. My name is Jesse Gustafson, also known as Jesse Standhard, Boston, Mass, CTHC. What does the Floorpunch 7-inch mean to me? Well, I remember we were at the New Milford Teen Center in New Milford, Connecticut, when the 7-inch was just released. And this was the first time I actually saw the 7-inch. Dave Murphy, New Jersey hardcore, he showed up with about 10 of them to sell. And, they made whatever it was, like 500 of them or 1,000. And he showed up with about 10 of them to sell. I couldn't remember what show this was at, but he showed up with all these to sell. And we were thrilled. I bought 3 of them. I don't know why, but I bought 3 of them. And basically 2 of my friends bought 3 of them, and that was it. Like, Murphy sold all of them right then and there. Now, Floorpunch was not playing this show, but, I had first heard them. I first heard the demo, I don't know, whatever it was. It came out like a year or so earlier, and it became like my entire life. And the fact that they were putting out a 7-inch, where at the time when a band was putting out a 7-inch, it was like, shit, you made it. You're putting out a 7-inch. That was like the biggest thing on earth, because it was also so difficult to do. But here's, my favorite band putting out a 7-inch, and there were new songs on it. Ooh, it was even more of a quote unquote polished recording. And, listening through it the first time, hearing, guys from other crews got away with a warning. Everybody else watch out. Holy shit. Like the fact that they just use a quote from Casino, which it also just recently came out, was like, this is awesome. Traveling all over, the Northeast and down to DC and, basically treating them like they were the Grateful Dead for, from the time the band started till, quote unquote, when they broke up in 2000, seeing kind of like they were our band. Like, I don't know if everybody would understand that, but it was like, they were our band. Like Floorpunch, in my eyes, 10 Yard Fight, like these were our bands. Like, yeah, we weren't in these bands, but these were like our fucking bands because like we had to go hard for them. And when I say me or we, it means, all of our friends, everybody was like, you put on for them because these were our fucking bands. And, it didn't matter where they were playing. Like I was in high school and, like, oh, we have to drive out to Allentown, Pennsylvania. And, fuck yeah, we're driving out to Allentown, Pennsylvania because Floorpunch is playing. Oh, it's on a Sunday at, 2 p.m. It's 5 hours from our house. Fuck yeah, we're driving out there. Oh, you're playing in Fieldsboro, New Jersey on a Sunday at 2 o'clock in a VFW hall. Fuck yeah, we're driving 5 hours. This is our favorite band. It really was a thing where, the fact that Floorpunch had a 7-inch, 10 Yard Fight had a 7-inch, like here's like all of our friends and all of, our bands who are putting out 7-inches. And it just felt like the biggest thing to like, you felt like you made it. It felt like they were, the Rolling Stones when you would put out a 7-inch because it was like a big thing. Now kind of going off topic of that, like the song No Exceptions. Song just smacks. Like for a new song that, obviously wasn't on the demo, song, just the mosh part so hard. Just hearing new songs that they had put out. And like most bands like that, not naming names, but like most bands can't write a good demo and 7-inch. They managed to do that and do an LP with good songs.
What do you think the impact of the 7-inch is on hardcore?
I mean, at the time, I think it was so niche, the impact that it had made. But now here you go. What is it? We're coming up on the 30-year anniversary of the demo being released in 1995. It'll literally be 30 years since that demo was released. But the impact of the 7-inch, I still put Floorpunch as like true canon of straight edge hardcore. I mean, yes, those dudes are my friends. I've traveled with them, tried playing in the band. It's one of my favorite straight edge bands. But the fact that those dudes are still like real dudes, like they're not corny. Not everybody's still straight edge, but the impact of that for me, I think is similar to the impact that, what Minor Threat would have made on kids in the early 80s, the same impact that a band like Youth of Today made on kids in the late 80s, Floorpunch for kids in the mid 90s and kind of going forward. I think that it really does stand the test of time, and not all bands stand the test of time. Like think about how many bands that are out there that not one hit wonders, but kind of flash in the pan sort of bands. Not many straight edge hardcore bands can play a show 30 years later and still have kids going off for them. Like that's really hard to do. I would just kind of put them up there as, there's Minor Threat, there's Youth of Today, there's Floorpunch. Like those bands are all in the same fucking conversation as, some, like dorkcore dudes may think that no, they have no business being in that conversation. It's like, no, fuck yeah, they do. Like they stood the test of time, and I would still put them up there. I mean, do I like Floorpunch more than those bands? I would say I like them just as much as those bands because that band is my dudes. But I would say their impact on hardcore and straight edge hardcore specifically rivals that of what Minor Threat and Youth of Today started. And they kind of carried the torch, and they still carry the torch.
All right, this is Mark Boardman, aka Boardy, friend of the show. Dan asked me to put some memories down about probably the greatest straight edge band of all time, Floorpunch. I can remember back in the day, before this sort of came out, it was dark days for hardcore in the United Kingdom. There were no traditional bands playing hardcore, maybe it's apart from Voorhees. But even when they played 7-1 in 12, their home club, if you like, no one was really interested. Everyone sort of went outside or whatever. People were sat around knitting with soy yogurt and wearing trousers made out of old wrapping paper from Christmas. Kids weren't allowed to mosh. If you moshed, you got looked at like you were a piece of shit. Dirty looks everywhere. No one was allowed to stage dive. And that's all my mates and me wanted to do. So we started our own band, started our own zine scene, and just did that, and we're sort of separate from the normal, what was the hardcore scene at the time. We just started our own UK hardcore, and I remember picking up a copy of In Effect's 11. I think it was from Pierre from Knuckle Dust, from his distro at the time, and in that there was an interview with Floorpunch. I remember reading it, and it was Brett Beach doing the interview rather than the editor of the zine, and it was with Zuzi, and I can't remember who else, but it was fucking hilarious, talking about how, paintball's about as much of a sport as ankle lifting, and talking about, just like hardcore and jumping around, and you're looking at all the pictures, and it's them all, leaping about with guitars and cut off camos and thermal underwear underneath, and good Warzone t-shirts, and you didn't really see that anywhere else at the time. And I was like, oh shit, this is fucking smart. I really like that, like sense of humor and stuff, and talking about having an ice cream eating contest while they're doing the interview, and they just connected with me straight away. And I'm sort of looking through and get to the end, and there's this advert, and it just says, "Do you remember hardcore?" with a big question mark. And they said, "Well, we do," and a moshing hood with the X'd up finger point underneath, just a Floorpunch in big sort of collegiate letters, and then on the side, the address for Brett, and it was for the demo for Brett Beach from In My Blood Records. I remember writing to Brett, and the demo had sold out, and he was like, "All right, yeah, the 7-inch is coming soon," or whatever. And then I never sent him the money for the 7-inch, and it was a while later when I got the 7-inch and the demo on a tape from someone. And putting it on, I was just blown away immediately. I had that life-altering experience of like, yeah, this is it. It's like that mix of people always compare. I can always remember people always comparing it to Project X because of the lyrics, or whatever. But to me, it never felt like that. It always felt like Judge meets Breakdown. That's what. The lyrics never seemed as stupid or silly or juvenile as the Project X lyrics. It always seemed a lot more serious, and the music was a lot more the harder side of New York. That thing that sort of Judge channels rather than Youth for Today, or the more Youth Crew stuff. And everything. It was probably a couple of years later before I picked up the 7-inch, but when you get it and the layout and everything, the Floorpunch with the big collegiate writing on. And all the pictures inside and stuff. The crew picture on the back with the graffiti with the I haven't got it here next to me actually, but with the dog, with the ball, and just everything about it. Letterman jackets, and I was like, yeah, this is fucking it. And at the time when it came out, it was really polarizing in the UK scene because people were saying that they were jocks and they weren't. That's not the hardcore isn't the place for that kind of thing anymore. And they had this. Like people had a real downer on them, like a real problem with them. So much so that I went to the 1 in 12 one time, which is, you know, a real awesome, amazing place. Brilliant club. But, you know, at the time it was run by some very PC people, and I had a Floorpunch shirt on, cut off camos and Nikes. And the guy at the door was like, "You're not coming in." I'm like, "Nah, that's bullshit." You know, it's not like it's a fucking screwdriver shirt. You know, and there was a bit of to and fro on the door or whatever. And I said, "No, that's fucking bullshit." And someone else was there and just said, "No, you can't do that. You got to let him in." So, you know, that's how polarizing it was. People really took a dislike, probably without even ever hearing of them, and only hearing rumors. And it wasn't internet rumors; it was like zine rumors or whatever. Everything was a rumor back then. So, yeah, I just hooked my wagon up to Floorpunch from that day till today. Just an amazing band, awesome people, and yeah, it's in my blood.
I'm Tim McMahon from New Jersey. Was in a band called Mouthpiece, Hands Tied, Triple Threat, Search. So yeah, I've just done a bunch of bands from New Jersey. Did a fanzine called Common Sense back in the late 80s, very early 90s. And that pretty much covers it, I think.
Dude, Double Cross. You guys had the best interview ever.
That's right. Yeah. I did Double Cross. Yeah. I forget about stuff that I've done in the 2000s. They've just come and gone so damn quickly. I mean, I know they're not gone, but, you know, it's just things just don't register like they did early on. But yeah, I did Double Cross online webzine thing for I don't know. It's probably close to 10 years. I know I started in 2008, I think it was. And I don't know. Yeah, I went for somewhere close to 10 years, 8, 9 years, something like that. So, but yeah, that ended a little while ago.
How lonely was it for Mouthpiece as a band in 1992 to 1994?
How lonely? Is that what you said?
Yeah, because you're kind of on an island by yourself.
Yeah, you know, it really was not something that we expected. I've said this a few times in different interviews, but when Mouthpiece started, we kind of started the band in like late 89, and all the bands that we loved were all still playing, you know, Judge and Gorilla Biscuits and Bold and Turning Point, and, you know, getting closer to New Jersey, Turning Point and Release, and, you know, all of our favorite bands were all still playing. So, you know, our goal was just to start a band and be able to play shows with all these bands. But by the time we really got going, it was 1990, and a lot of these bands were all breaking up. So the scene that we had come up in was really gone. Yeah, I mean, it really was kind of gone at that point. All those kids that were around in 89 and early 90 seemed to be like, you know, a couple years older than us, and they were going off to college. And, you know, back then, which is different now, is kids just didn't stick around long, you know, that long. These days, it seems like it's very common for kids to be still into hardcore 10, 20 years later. But back then it was, I don't know, it was like they got into it, and then within a couple years they were moved on to the next thing. You know, there was this big thriving scene here in New Jersey in the late 80s with clubs like City Gardens, and they were doing shows at Rutgers, and there was just shows all over the place, and all these big bands were constantly playing. You know, you'd have 500 to 800, 900,000 people at shows, and it was just huge and a really vibrant happening scene. And then it seemed like overnight, you know, from 89 to 90, things just changed. So many bands broke up, and you know, like I said, all these bands that we loved were gone, and a lot of the kids were gone. And So we had started doing the band at around that time period, you know, from that late 89 into 90, again, just trying to fall in place with all these other bands, you know, get on shows with these bands. And as a matter of fact, like one of our big goals, we had a friend that used to go to the Anthrax in Connecticut, and he used to talk to the Sheridan brothers that did the shows, and he said, "Hey, when you guys, you know, are ready," he said, "I'll put a word in for you guys to, you know, get a show up there at the Anthrax." And you know, for us, that was just like a dream come true. You know, that was a goal for us. You know, in you know, late '89, early '90s. So we had to have this conversation about trying to get us on the bill for the last Youth of the Day show. There was just talk. I don't know what it was, if it was, you know, anything valid, but, you know, Youth of the Day played their last show at Fender's in California. And the talk was that they were going to come back and play one more show at the Anthrax. And this guy, Jason, that we knew, was going to get us on that bill. So, you know, that was kind of the vibe at the time is we were just going to, you know, fit in with what was happening. But by the time we got up and running, like I said, all these bands were gone. That last Youth of the Day show at the Anthrax never happened. So many of our favorite bands were gone, and we just started playing shows to a very small group of friends, really. You know, basement shows, VFW hall shows. I mean, we did play some tail end shows with bands like Turning Point and Release and Vision, and you know, some of the bands that we were hoping to play with, we did play with, but things were so different very quickly, and you know, before we knew it, it was like a sort of a scene of all new kids that were, you know, maybe our age, maybe a little bit younger, but most of the older kids that we were seeing at shows, they weren't really interested in what we were doing. Maybe they had moved on already. Of course, not everybody, but you know, a lot of what I had seen at all those shows prior. So, yeah, we were kind of on our own in a way, but there were a lot of other like young bands sort of happening. But it really wasn't until we teamed up with like Rob Fish had started a band called Resurrection. You know, he had done Release, and he started Resurrection, and then Ari, who had played in Enough, he started Lifetime. Ari had also done a band called Courage, which was like 89, 90-ish. So like those guys who had come from some more established type bands were now starting some newer bands, and we kind of teamed up with them. So Ari started Lifetime and Rob started Resurrection, and we started playing pretty much like every weekend with each other. You know, we were all guys from the same era, and just starting off new. Those guys starting off with brand new bands, but had come from older bands, whereas we were just starting our first band. And yeah, it was cool in a way because this new scene was just developing. You know, there was just so many kids coming out of the woodwork and just stoked on new bands. You know, they were familiar with the old bands, but they were a little bit younger and they might have missed those old bands. So they were jumping in and they were just so excited and full of energy. And, you know, it worked out well, but I would say that, yeah, there was definitely a stretch there for a year. I don't know, from 90 to 92, where it was pretty desolate. The shows were small, but we had fun. I mean, we made the most of it. Like I said earlier, there was just a big group of friends that went to every show and just supported us, and we just hung out and had a good time. We were all sort of into the same thing. They traveled all our shows with us, you know, whether it was, you know, South Jersey or it was out in Pennsylvania somewhere. That's where a lot of the shows that we were playing were happening, within New Jersey and Pennsylvania. But like, this group of whatever, 15, 20 kids that would just go to like all of our shows and hang out and, afterwards go out to eat and just, have a good time. So, although it was different than what we had hoped for it to be, the bands were different and the venues were different and the scene was definitely different. It was still cool and fun and exciting for us. And, like I said, we definitely made the most of it.
What do you think was the catalyst for the youth crew revival in 95?
Well, geez, 95. Well, I mean, I feel like, Mouthpiece was around from 90 to 96. And by 95, I feel like we were kind of at our height of popularity. And I know we certainly always wave that banner for, the more classic sounding straight edge hardcore. So I think we had a hand in it. But there were other bands that were, popping up with that sort of sound before, probably around 95. And I'm trying to think, Floorpunch obviously was one of them, and 10-Yard Fight, and then you had like, I don't know, Fast Break and Rain on the Parade from Pennsylvania. And I wouldn't necessarily call these bands like youth crew style bands. I never really felt comfortable calling any band that wasn't, actually a part of the youth crew, a youth crew band. But, I know what you're saying as far as just the sound and stuff like that. But yeah, I think that at some point, probably in 95, I guess, Floorpunch and 10-Yard Fight and those other bands I mentioned. You had like Redemption 87 from California. There was a whole group of bands kind of coming together and playing that more traditional, fast, straight edge hardcore sound, New York hardcore influenced. But, when I say that, more like Youth of Today, Break Down the Walls, as opposed to Cro-Mags or Agnostic Front or something like that. So I think, probably around that time period, all those bands coming up, and I guess a lot of kids were interested in it. A lot of kids kind of ate it up, and then as Mouthpiece was breaking up in 96, and we started Hands Tied, and that kind of fell right in place with that whole theme that was kind of happening at that time. So yeah, I would definitely credit, those bands I mentioned as having something to do with that whole sort of interest in that style of hardcore, that whole revival of that sound.
What are your personal opinions on the Floorpunch demo and the 7-inch?
Man. Yeah, I love the Floorpunch demo. I mean, that's always been my favorite recording that they've ever done. I remember very vividly when that band was starting. I believe it kind of all started at the show in Chatham, New Jersey, that we played. Mouthpiece played with Ignite, and I want to say it was Snapcase that played. And I remember Ignite playing, and I guess I could credit Ignite as being another one of those bands that sort of carried that torch and got kids interested in that whole, classic hardcore sound. I didn't mention them before, but yeah, I remember a bunch of us being excited that this was like the first time Ignite was playing out here. We had heard the Lost and Found CD, and we had heard the earlier stuff with Randy from Push Aside singing. So everybody was into that stuff, and them playing, I think it was sort of a last minute thing that they played that show, but you know, with that sort of vibe that was going on at that time in 1995, where people were really picking up on that classic early hardcore sound, a band like Ignite falling into place, or you know, whatever, falling into that bill, because like I said, it was a sort of a last minute thing that they got on the bill. And being ex-members of Unity and No for an Answer, you know, Justice League, all that kind of stuff, was really exciting for a lot of us. And I say like a lot of us, meaning like, you know, us, the guys in Mouthpiece and the guys in Floorpunch, before they were doing Floorpunch. So I know that they were looking forward to checking them out. And I remember them doing Uniform Choice cover, and some of the guys from what would end up being Floorpunch and their crew, like just really going out on the dance floor and just having a good time. And I think it was sometime around that point at that show where those guys said something about, you know, we should start a band and call it Floorpunch, because Release used to, on the Release 7-inch, I think they there was some kind of nod to something called like the Floorpunch Crew or something like that. And Chris Zuzai, who was in Release, you know, was hanging out with what would be the Floorpunch guys and everything. So it was just sort of a term that was used once in a while, I guess. And yeah, so I think that everybody, those guys all kind of started talking about doing a band, and we were all kind of hanging out at that point because the Cro-Mags were playing a lot. They had started playing, I guess, in '94, you know, John Joseph, and not Harley, but the John Joseph version of the Cro-Mags was playing a lot. And then I know a lot of those guys, Porter and Zev and Bill, Zuzai, King Shot, all those guys were coming around to all those Cro-Mag shows. So we all started hanging out a lot at that point back then. But so when that Chatham show happened and the idea of starting a band and doing something very traditional, classic, straight edge hardcore style, they were all, you know, talking to me. And I remember it all sort of happening fast. I mean, it gone to be like just a discussion at a show to next thing I know, a demo's recorded. And I remember us all hanging out at my wife's parents' house. She was my girlfriend at that point, but we were all hanging out at her house, and I had to go home for some reason. And I remember Porter saying, "Hey, I'll take a ride with you back to your house." He goes, "I'll play you the demo for the new band." And we get in my car, and I'm all excited to check it out. He pops it in, and you know, it's the Floorpunch demo. But at the time, I don't know that they were 100% sold on calling it Floorpunch. And I remember Porter asking me, like, what do you think of the name Floorpunch? Do you think that's cool? And I mean, to me, yeah, it's cool, but it felt like it could be mistaken as a little jokey, you know what I mean? And they weren't really a joke band. I mean, you know, like 10 Yard Fight was kind of, I mean, they weren't a joke band, but it was done sort of in a comedic way to some extent. And I'm not sure when Floorpunch started that they were really thinking of doing something that was going to be, you know, funny. But I think the name sounded a little funny, a little goofy. And I remember telling Porter, like, you guys should probably change the name. But luckily he didn't listen to me, and they kept the name because obviously everybody loved it. But yeah, I remember driving from her house to my house and listening to the demo and just thinking, holy shit, this is great. I mean, it was everything that I had wanted to hear in a new hardcore band. But really, I can't think of any band that really nailed it like they did. I mean, there were so many bands around that time that were good, and I definitely liked, but there was something different about the Floorpunch demo. I mean, it was just, the songs were well written. I mean, the musicians were all good. You know, King Shot was a great drummer, and Porter we had no idea what his voice was going to sound like. And I just remember thinking, wow, dude, your voice sounds great. It sounds awesome. And I remember just thinking like the lyrics were cool. I guess some of the lyrics are a little tongue in cheek, but they were cool. It was just like so straight edge and so in your face, and like I said, I ate it up. It was kind of a culmination of everything I wanted to hear in a band at that point, because really there was nobody else doing anything like that. I mean, as much as Mouthpiece was kind of credited for carrying that torch of that like sort of late 80s type of thing, I mean, we were much more going for a Southern California style. I mean, we loved No for an Answer and Chain of Strength and Hard Stance and Uniform Choice and stuff like that. Dag Nasty, obviously DC band, but we were definitely going for something different. We weren't going for like a straight up New York hardcore, Youth of Today, break down the walls, straight ahead type of vibe. And they definitely were. And, not really many other bands that I can think of were trying to do that, So it was different, and it was very welcomed. I would think I'd have to credit. I mean, I don't know who wrote all the music, but I mean, Zuzai had come from Release and had come from, the late 80s hardcore scene, going to shows at CB's and going to the Anthrax. And so he definitely had that whole spirit. And I'm sure, that had something to do with how that band sounded. I know Porter was going to shows in the 80s and going to, shows up and down, I guess like the whole Jersey Shore area, and seeing all those, late 80s bands coming around. So I know that he had, a hand in it, obviously. But yeah, it was great. It was just a very welcomed sound.
Right. So they do the demo, but then to be able to come back and put out a 7-inch that matches.
Oh, right.
In an era where the 7-inch is so important, and in a genre where the 7-inch is so important.
Yeah.
Can you speak on that?
You did ask me about the 7-inch, and I didn't get to that, but yeah, the 7-inch. Well, actually, I think before the 7-inch, they did a track that would be on after the demo. They did a track, I think it was called Always, that was on the Tension Building comp. Time Is Now comp. So I think that was probably the next track that we heard after the demo. And funny enough, when they submitted that track for the 7-inch, my friend Steve put that 7-inch out. They didn't have a name for the song, and I just remember looking at the lyrics and listening to the song, and Steve was asking them like, "What do you want to call this song?" And they're like, "I don't know, you guys name it." So I just looked at the lyrics and said, "Steve, let's just call it Always." I think that was one of the words in the song. So, but that was a particularly great song. I remember hearing that song and thinking that was awesome. And then things really picked up for Floorpunch. I guess what I should mention is like, once that demo came out, Mouthpiece was playing quite a bit. And like I said earlier, we were kind of at our height of popularity. So we were getting asked to play shows all over the place. And we were kind of in a position where we could tell the promoters, well, we want to bring our friends band along, So a lot of these shows we would get Floorpunch on the bill, and it was cool because their demo had just come out and people were really kind of excited about it. So they were like a perfect band to bring on the road with us and play these shows and stuff with us. So, but as that started happening, they started gaining their own popularity on their own. And really didn't, need us. And somewhere in that time period, they recorded the 7-inch. And for the life of me, I can't remember exactly when they recorded the 7, because I remember, the demo coming out, and then it was like, next thing I know, so much was happening, and then it was like, oh yeah, we recorded the 7-inch, and that was coming out. And I remember hearing it and thinking, wow, this is Jesus. These guys did not they did not take a dip in quality whatsoever. It just continued on and really even got harder. They kind of dipped more into, whereas the 7-inch was more straightforward, youth of today type of vibe. The demo I'm saying is more the youth of today, break down the walls era vibe. I remember thinking that the 7-inch started getting a little bit slower, a little bit more of that, like raw deal breakdown sort of influence started coming in. But they did it so well. I mean, it was great. So I think everybody, it was just a natural next step that everybody liked, dug, enjoyed, and I was certainly one of them.
I know you don't like the phrase "the youth crew revival," but that's kind of what it's referred to.
Oh, I know. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. What do you think is the peak of that youth crew revival in the 90s?
Oh man. I the peak of it to me, and I guess this is just from things I've heard and things I've, videos I've seen, pictures I've seen, but like it seemed to me like the peak of it was sometime around that like last 10-yard fight show in Boston. I don't know what year that was, maybe 98 or something like that. But I mean, I know there's a whole like I guess that isn't the Edge Day thing sort of based on that last show that they played, or is it based on the reunion show that they played? I can't remember, but I know there's a ton of significance with that last 10-yard fight show in Boston and just how big it was. And I've seen the video, the whatever sort of like 10-yard fight documentary, and all the kids lined up to go to that show. So I don't know. In my mind, that's probably the peak of it, but I mean, I don't know for sure. I feel like when Mouthpiece was going, it certainly wasn't the peak of it. I mean, people were definitely towards the tail end, were definitely getting interested in it. The whole 95, 96 era, they were really, 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 really getting into it. And there was a lot of hype about a lot of bands that were happening, with that style at that point. And then once I was doing Hands Tied, I mean, I do know when Hands Tied went to Europe in 97, 98, it was huge over there in Europe. I mean, we did great. And I know Floorpunch followed not too long after us. And I think they had a great tour too. But I don't know. Again, I feel like from just things I've read, things I've heard, videos I've seen, pictures I've seen, that era there where 10-yard fight played their last show seemed to be the peak of it to me, just because it all kind of came together. And I don't know if I don't want to say that it ended there or that it completely wrapped up there, but it seemed like I think that's kind of where it came together, in my mind at least.
Yeah, and just for everyone, last 10-yard fight show is October 17th, 1999, and that is Edge Day.
Oh, okay. So that is, yeah, right. So it's a pretty significant date, which is still, remembered today. So, and I think, by 2000, things started changing in the sense where you had like American Nightmare playing. I don't know exactly when American Nightmare started, but I remember in 2000, American Nightmare had already been around. So that sound had started to switch, and I know they were super popular at that point. And they weren't like going for that sort of youth crew revival sound. They were doing something a little crazier, a little heavier, a little more manic, I guess. And I feel like so by 2000 things had started to change.
Yeah, on this podcast we've discussed what we believe is the Mount Rushmore of what killed 90s youth crew. And
Mhm.
it is as follows: Good Clean Fun, Better Than 1,000, Ray Capo's 1999 Mentality, and those two
Mhm.
Where Fear and Weapons Meet songs off the Super Soul comp. Do
Okay.
you agree with that, or do you think it was something else?
Well, I'm not familiar with the Where Fear and Weapons Meet songs on that comp. Um, what in what way? In what way do you mean like Better Than 1,000? You're just talking about how everything went down at the tail end of Better Than 1,000. Is that what you mean?
It's just overkill, right? Like it seems so insincere that people are
Yeah.
like, okay, like it's so popular that people are coming back, and it had an element of phoniness to it, and
Mhm.
Good Clean Fun. The joke bands start
Oh,
up again,
gotcha.
and then
Yeah,
that's long in the
it's
tooth, and then Ray doing doing that comp that's like the rebirth of hardcore, and it's like, dude,
right.
this thing like kind of it started up again like 4 years ago. Like you're 4 years late. Like stop it.
Right.
It's time for something.
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, not to be a cop out, but for me, it's tough to really be honest and comment on that because, see, Hands Tied went to Europe in 97, 98, and then we came back in 98 to the US and we broke up. We just had issues internally, and I was just a bit fried. So like, I had been doing bands for 8 years straight, which, in retrospect is not really a big deal. But, as a kid from late 89 to 1998, 1999, just doing all these bands straight and playing constantly and everything. By the time we broke up, I was just, like I said, I was just a little burnout, a little fried. And I didn't get out of hardcore by any stretch. I still went to shows, but I think I kind of took a little break in a sense where I didn't go to as many shows. I didn't pick up every single record. Um, but at around that time was, I was like online and there was the rev board. So I was still tuned into things in that sense. But yeah, I mean, I guess I see what you're saying. I mean, I don't know that I would particularly point out those bands. I mean, like Good Clean Fun, like I didn't even know when they started or, um, I never saw them play back then. I mean, yeah, I saw them play probably in the early 2000s, I guess. Um, but like they weren't a band that was on my radar. I just didn't really know what the hell was going on, with that sort of thing. And the whole Better Than 1,000 thing. I mean, I will tell you that when Better Than 1,000 started, I was pretty excited about it, and I knew all those guys. And but where things ended and how things ended up, that was sort of that little stretch there where I wasn't totally plugged into everything that was happening. So yeah, I guess I can't accurately tell you, if those bands had something to do with it. In my mind, it just seemed like uh, a lot of the bands that were, sort of the top of the heap at that point that were pushing that style, like the Floorpunch and 10-Yard Fight. And I know I'm forgetting, 20 other bands, but, those bands were all sort of breaking up. And in my mind, it was the next thing to happen was that sort of American Nightmare scene, sound, whatever, was sort of just the next big thing, So, I mean, in my mind, that's kind of how it went.
What do you think is the legacy of the Floorpunch 7-inch in New Jersey hardcore, and then also hardcore in general?
Oh, I mean, I really think that the legacy of the Floorpunch 7-inch in New Jersey and just everywhere is one that is very wrapped up in it's kind of gotten legendary status just because of the whole 88 pressed on gold vinyl, and just handed out to friends, and how that record has been coveted by so many. I mean, I hear kids put it on the same level as like, Chung King and stuff like that. I don't know that it is, sold for that kind of money, but I know it is definitely considered to be a really high end record. And I can't help but think that sort of bolsters the whole legacy of that 7-inch. I mean, I think it's a great 7-inch. I definitely do. But I think that the whole, legacy around the pressing of the 7-inch, and it was cool that Brett Beach had done it on in My Blood Records, and so it was almost like it was done by the band because he was just a friend, crew member and everything. So just having him do it, and it basically just done, DIY style, and then be able to catch that kind of traction, how popular it was. And I think people look back on it as being one of the coolest 7-inches to come out of New Jersey, for, again, not only just the music, but the way that they really sort of changed the scene at that point, and it being such a cool collectible record. I think that's how it'll be looked at.